If Odysseus from the Odyssey was a real person, he would not have been able to understand the Homeric Greek of his own story. And actually, the language that he would have spoken was only discovered in the last century. If you accept the Trojan War as a real historical event, which a lot of scholars do, then the events of the Odyssey predate the first time it was written down by like 400 years, which might make you think it's all just made up, but while the story does contain a lot of fantastical elements and historical anachronisms, most scholars don't think it's just fabricated. There's a lot of details about Bronze Age society that Iron Age Homer couldn't have known without the information having gotten passed down somehow. For instance, descriptions of weapons, armor, and trade routes that were no longer in use at his time. So the consensus is that the story was part of an oral tradition that was passed down through the centuries by poets using a poetic meter to help them memorize it. But the epic likely didn't get formalized until pretty long after the events that inspired it actually happened. So the question is, what language would Odysseus have spoken if he was telling his own story? Well, here's an example of what it looked like written if you want a sneak peek. This script called Linear B was used in modern day Greece up until the time of the Bronze Age collapse. So it fell out of use right around the time that the events of the Odyssey would have taken place. And for a long time, nobody knew what language it recorded. It was only through the painstaking work of scholars Alex Kober and Michael Ventris that it was eventually deciphered. And the reason it was so difficult is that the script was originally designed for one language and then used by a different language. The first language is often called Minoan, which is yet to be understood by linguists, and the second language was Mycenaean Greek. And if Odysseus existed, he probably spoke the latter. But despite it being a type of Greek, there's a couple reasons why he still wouldn't have understood Homer. First off, it was a very archaic type of Greek that had a lot of sounds and words that didn't exist by the time of Homer. For instance, it was long enough for the word gue, which means and, to turn all the way into te. And then for instance, the word oinos, meaning wine, which kind of sounds like English, eventually changed into oinos. So at best, Odysseus could have understood the Odyssey about as well as Shakespeare could have understood modern English. But there's a reason even that's not very likely. And that's because the Odyssey was essentially written in a made-up literary language. It was a highly formalized poetic register that even some contemporaries might have struggled to understand. So maybe it would be more like Shakespeare trying to understand Kendrick Lamar rapping or something.